Good afternoon. We're going to start a Finance Committee today. Can we start with a roll call?
Yes, we'll start with Committee Member Harmon.
Here.
Vice Chair Friedman.
Here.
Chair Gutierrez.
Here. And, general public comment? Do we have any?
Chair Gutierrez, no hands are raised.
Thank you. We will move on to our first agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez and committee members Friedman and Harmon. My name is Laura Doubles, and I'm the Housing and Human Services Manager for the city. Thank you for having us here today to present to you a proposal for a restructure of a loan with Domestic Violence Solutions on property located at 521 West Victoria Street. And here with me today is Mr. Ken Oplinger, and he's the Executive Director of Domestic Violence Solutions. Staff's recommendation is that Finance Committee recommend that Council, A, introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving a restated loan agreement in the amount of $430,000 with Domestic Violence Solutions, secured by a restated deed of trust and a 90-year affordability control covenant imposed on real property located at 521 West Victoria Street, and authorizing the Community Development Director to execute such agreements subject to approval as to form by the City Attorney as necessary. This property is comprised of 16 one-bedroom units. It's a multi-family apartment complex with offices and a clinical counseling space. It also has 16 parking spaces, and it's all in a secured fenced campus. 15 of the units are permanent housing apartments with Section 8 vouchers, and one of the units is used for transitional housing that is used to house a survivor of domestic violence and their family for 6 to 18 months. Domestic Violence Solutions will continue to own, manage, and operate the property in the same capacity. The Section 8 vouchers will remain and will be provided for rental assistance. The housing will be for low-income residents at a category of below 80% AMI. Clinical counseling and supportive services will be provided, and an on-site manager will be present during the business hours. Next slide, please. Here's some pictures of the property. And DVS was actually founded in 1977. They have provided 47 years of services to victims of domestic violence. They currently operate a 25-bed emergency shelter, as well as the 16-unit multifamily apartment complex. DVS provides a wide range of services: emergency, transitional, and permanent housing, counseling, job and life skill training, and case management. Back in 1993, the city gave a $430,000 loan. That was the original principal. The terms were for 30 years. It was due on a residual receipts payments basis for 4.5% interest initially. And in 2008, that was actually amended to be 0%, and all of the accrued interest at that point was forgiven because of the fact that they did not show any positive cash flow at that point. It did mature in 2023, that loan, and no payments had been made. Next slide, please. So for the proposed loan terms, DVS has actually came to the city and was inquiring about possibly looking at acquiring new properties to expand their services in our community. So we wanted to help support them in that endeavor. So we are offering a deferred 5-year payment period in order to allow them to use that money to hopefully acquire a new property. And then after that first 5 years, they would make amortized payments for the remainder of the 15-year term for 10 years. And those are approximately going to be $3,583 per month. We still will write this loan at a 0% interest due to the community benefit that it gives, and the maturity date will be in 2039. For affordability, we will be placing a new 90-year covenant on the property. Currently, it is restricted right now to transitional housing. However, that will be changed, and we will be putting the covenant on to change it to 15 units of permanent housing with 1 unit of transitional housing. It will also be restricted to low-income households at 80% AMI and below. There will be no additional funding needed or supplied by the city. The original principal was already dispersed back in 1993. And the amortized payments that will be given back to the city during that 10-year period will bring revenue back into the Affordable Housing Fund that can then be recycled into new projects. So in doing so, we are aligning our project here with general plan goals. It's supporting the city's general plan 2023-2031 housing element update, goal 3, policy 3.1, shelter for people experiencing homelessness. And it's to partner with and support other agencies and nonprofit organizations in their efforts to provide shelter and services for people experiencing homelessness or those on the verge of homelessness. And so in summary, this would retain the 16 one-bedroom units in the city's affordable housing portfolio for a new 90-year term. And we would be partnering with a very highly successful and established local agency that we worked with for many years that serves a very highly vulnerable population. And this will also help victims of domestic violence who are at risk of homelessness secure housing and the supportive services they need to work towards self-sufficiency. And now we're back at the staff recommendation screen. I am here for any questions, as well as Mr. Opplinger as well. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from the committee? Public comment? No.
Chair Gutierrez, no hands are raised.
Anybody want to take a motion?
So,
No, it's not.
okay, so, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll just say, one, appreciate the partnership that we have with Domestic Violence Solutions in bringing this forward. It's an extremely vulnerable population, and a lot of times don't have resources for housing situations due to circumstances. And so the ability, one, to continue that, ensure that those covenants are going into the year, I couldn't believe it, but 2114, not 2014, but 2114. It was kind of seeing that on there. But also to really establish that this will be structurally sound, and then ultimately with I had some questions initially, but then I was able to figure it out. Deferring the first 10 years and then coming in on the back end for the remainder, it'll get funding back into our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which will then be used to facilitate more affordable housing. So I'm supportive of it, and will gladly make the motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Do we have a second? Can we take a vote, please?
Yes, motion was made by Vice Chair Friedman, seconded by Member Harmon. We'll start with Member Harmon. Vice Chair Friedman.
Yes.
Chair Gutierrez.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Now we can move on to item number 2, establishing fees for the citywide parklet program.
Sorry. My name is Megan Salas. I'm a parking program supervisor and here to talk to you today about Parklet program fees. So go to the next slide. Okay. On December 12th, 2023, Council adopted Ordinance 6134 which authorized and regulated parklets in the public right-of-way and established the parklet license application process. Council then directed staff to return or to prepare a resolution and return to establish the fees for that program. So just a quick review of where we are and of the program, the application process. Businesses with existing parklets were required to submit an application, a preliminary application, by February 1st. 15 applications were received for existing parklets and 2 applications were received for proposed parklets. Staff are currently reviewing those preliminary applications. We have a target completion date of March 31st, although we are actually working through them much faster than that. And I do hope that we can start issuing preliminary application reports within the next week. Those preliminary application reports will essentially be a roadmap for the businesses. They will guide them to which fees they will need to pay, which process they will need to go through, whether they will need to have a coastal development permit. So it's essentially a roadmap telling them how to go through that, the parklet license application process, should they choose to do that. So the parklet license, once they have submitted their parklet license application, it would then go through design review. If it needs to have a coastal development permit, they would need to secure that coastal development permit. Once staff has reviewed and approved their plans, and again, they've gone through the design review, then the Public Works Director would issue a parklet license to the business. So as noted earlier, staff were directed to return to council to establish fees for the parklet preliminary review process, as well as the license application process and the annual parklet license fee. Staff recommends the following fees, which were determined by estimating staff time, as well as reviewing existing fees for similar city programs. So we'll start with the preliminary application fee. Staff recommends a fee of $514, and that mirrors the community development's preliminary application fee for outdoor dining on private property. Next is the parklet license application fee. And for that, staff recommends $2,500 for the permit fee, and that is to account for staff time to process the application, as well as to review the proposed parklet plans for compliance with engineering and traffic safety requirements. The annual parklet license fee is proposed to match that of the outdoor business facility license fee on State Street. That fee is at $2 per square foot. It would be assessed annually, which would be $24 per square foot per year. And then for the coastal development permit, as with the outdoor dining on private property program, staff determined that these projects would take significantly less time to review than the standard CDP process. So staff is proposing a reduced CDP fee of $535, as with the outdoor dining on private property CDP fee. So that is what I have for you today, and if you have any questions.
Questions? Ms. Harmon?
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. Thank you so much. I may have missed this. So on the annual license fee of $24 per square foot, so you said that the license fee or the rental fee that we're charging on State Street is $2, correct?
$2 per square foot per month.
Okay. Oh, and so this is 24 per year.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's extremely helpful. I know you clarified, but I somehow missed that in my surprise. So how does this number equate to, or how does it look in comparison to the sort of average cost per square foot of indoor seating? I know that was a big sort of point of conversation when we were talking about State Street, and I'm just curious how that maths.
Sure, thank you. Sarah Clark, Downtown Team Manager. I'm working with Megan on this. So that would really depend. I'm assuming you're referring to permitting for a new restaurant or facility. And those things are, it would be difficult to make that comparison because it really would depend on the extent of work that they were doing for the business and for their other permits, whether they're making exterior alterations, all sorts of things. So the cost there could really vary.
So it's
quite
not
bit.
a helpful sort of, okay, thank you. And then secondarily, I guess my question would be in terms of outreach to the applicants that you've received thus far and sort of where we would want to place this charge. Were there conversations that led up to this number? Or is it truly just based on what we have on State Street is what we're doing here?
For the annual license fee, yes, it is just,
What we're doing there, we're doing here. Okay,
Exactly, yes.
thank you very much.
Any more questions? I have a couple questions. So for the parking license application fees, you referred that it's also going to cover staff time. My only concern, and I'm looking at this as the customer, the community development department is not open Monday through Friday. And as the customer, it's really not their problem that we don't are fully staffed. So can you do you have the breakdown of, staff time that it takes, like exactly what is the client going to get for that application fee?
so I do not have the exact breakdown of staff time, but I can say that this is the Public Works team who would be reviewing these. So the Public Works Engineering team, the Public Works Traffic team, as well as the Downtown Parking team review process.
And the
So-
reason I'm asking is because I've been getting a lot of feedback from the community that sometimes when applications are submitted, they take a while, and I'm just curious if these applications are going to be streamlined. What exactly are we going to give the client for this amount of money?
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez, committee members. We don't have a specific streamlining process in place. We have worked through the application process. The length of time that application processing would take would be dependent on both what sort of approvals they needed. If they're in the coastal zone, the coastal development permit would be dependent on community development workloads at that time. The public works portion of the process would be relatively quick. I wouldn't imagine that it would take much more than a month or so. But again, it would be dependent on design review and CDP review, really.
Thank you. Any more questions? We'll move on to public comment. Okay, so the first person up, thank you, staff. Alvaro Rojas.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for hearing me. I just wanted to address some of the metrics that we're dealing with as far as small businesses go. Alcazar in particular is a pretty small place. It's 890 square feet. And what concerns me is the front-loaded expenses involved in doing the parklet, such as, well, the $2,500, K-rails to get them there, to upgrade to the sort of midterm process that's going to lead to the final product. Quick and dirty math, we're looking at, personally, close to $10,000. We make less than $500,000 in annual revenue at Alcazar. Restaurants have a national take-home of 6%, and that's according to the California Restaurant Association. So that, again, the metrics on that are less than $30,000. $10,000 is a solid third of that, and that doesn't include the rents and the rest of the expenses that go along with this. So this, for us in particular, we had to pay the $514 just to stay in the conversation, which was fine, but moving forward, it's just an untenable model. And I think a lot of small businesses that have been here for years and years are going to face the same financial hurdles. So it would be nice, in short, to maybe adopt a sliding scale based on square footage or something a little bit more approachable, especially on the front-loaded expenses. maybe to amortize the payment schedule or something like that. But I just wanted to make my voice heard that it would be a struggle and really untenable for a tiny little footprint for me to go. This doesn't even mention the time involved in just orchestrating this whole thing while trying to run a restaurant. So anyway, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Elski? Elska.
Hi, I'm Elska Freebairn. I manage the Blue Owl. Thank you so much for inviting us to speak here today. I'm just going to go through the fees one at a time. The preliminary application fee is totally reasonable, and it was our understanding that after that we would receive very specific parameters to adhere to when researching the parklet barriers. In doing my research, I found that it's possible to rent the barriers, the K-rails, for about $500 a month, but the delivery fees are $5,000, not to even mention the removal fees if the city doesn't give us a long-term plan. The parklet license application fee was a bit of a huge shock to us, $2,500 without any specific guidelines or parameters about what that's going to get us in the long term is a huge number to ask of a small business without any guarantee. If, for example, the city at the outset would say this is for a 5-year permit or a 5-year license or something that could be amortized over time, the $2,500 total fee is completely reasonable. But at this time, without any guarantee about what that's going to get us, it feels unreasonable. The parklet license fee for $2 a square foot per month is totally reasonable. The coastal development permit, I understand that for a larger business, paying $15,000, which was mentioned in the letter, but $5,000 for anyone in the coastal development. I immediately think of Moni's, which is one of my favorite spots in the Funk Zone that I know falls under that space. That seems to me like an enormous fee. So you're asking $8,000 for a small business up front with no guarantee. That just seems unreasonable. I totally understand that to run the city, you need fees for your time, but without any guarantees on the outset for what that's actually going to bring us as businesses, it doesn't make any financial sense. It's not really financially viable at all for us to invest in $10,000 at the front end without any guarantee. If you could provide a 5-year guarantee or a 10-year guarantee or something that could be amortized or something that for those, we're all in a lease. So if we lease this space and say we lose our lease or we lease it to another business, do they get to keep that? Do we know that yet? Is the parklet going to stay there with the business, or if the business changes ownership, does that go up? There are all kinds of questions to that end that are kind of left unanswered. I think that's everything that I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nadia is next.
Hello, council members. Thank you for having us today. My name is Nadia from the Blue Owl. I wanted to echo what Alvaro and Elska said as well, that as a small business, we do have a lot of different expenses, and usually our cash flow is one such as it comes in and out. So whenever we put something in, we're hoping to multiply it so that we can continue to invest in the business, invest in the employees, and keep moving forward. And then having this block of a fee for the parklet license permit, it just kind of does tie things up without knowing what's going forward. We already did the initial application, and we were expected to hear from somebody about a design review, somebody to come out and take a look at it. We're still kind of left in the dark, and so then just to put out some more funds and not know what's coming ahead, I understand it's a process, and I think that at this point there's 17 applications, and that maybe will help expedite the process. But I think that what we're all saying here is that we're a little bit frustrated at just as things continue to grow and change, we're just being left to right, pulled from different directions and not knowing what's happening really. So we would like to in a sense, just request a little bit of mercy, if you will, just have a little bit more of knowing what's going on. Maybe give us a timeline of over the next 3 months, this is what's going to happen. The applications fee, somebody's going to call you for the design review, and within a week or within 6 months, whatnot. Instead of being put completely in the dark, knowing that at least there's going to be some form of guarantee out of this to a certain extent, because if we put in the $2,500 application fee, and then we were told that, okay, actually we changed our mind. Now, if you're on a side street, no more parklets, then we just threw away $2,500, just like the two-way, one-way street and whatnot. But I don't know if that's going to happen. But I'm just saying, as things continue to evolve, things just keep coming up and changing. But yeah, that's really all I had to say. I just wanted to, reaffirm what everyone else was saying. But otherwise, thank you so much, and especially to you very much.
Thank
I wanna
you.
hear from everyone. Thank you.
Next person, Graham.
Thank you guys for spending the time to hear us out. My name is Graham Hadidian. I run the downtown Fess Parker Wines property, the Fess Parker Funk Zone. We have right here 5 people that are speaking to small businesses within Santa Barbara. There are more. We have all 14 actually that we've talked to, and they all emailed me actually personally. I've developed a structure of common issues we're all facing, many of which you guys have heard. Some are going to hear at the city council at 2 today. The biggest issue that we're having is not that there's fees. We understand that we have to pay, that we're putting an investment in. The problem is that we don't have a blank check to pull from. There's deadlines that are being asked of us. We don't know when they're coming. We don't know whether or not after this $2,500 fee and then potentially a coastal permit for us and a few other businesses, that the design review is going to request certain materials that the parklet are going to be made out of that are well outside of our range of costs. We're really just asking that in the long term, we be able to recoup the expenses towards the business's benefit over time. That may look like some of these fees don't go away, but they are spread out over a duration so that we are not asked to front load the costs right away. For instance, the last 3 months have been a little rainy. I don't know if you guys have noticed. It's not as bad as last year, but it's been pretty trim as far as walking traffic goes. We're coming out of the lean months, and now we're being asked, along with some of the other benchmarks that we have to adhere to, like the traffic barriers, not necessarily K-rails, just traffic barriers in general. There's some high costs there. Heaven forbid we shell out 10 grand, which is sort of looking like the general minimum number that some of us might have to do, not including the coastal development permits, and a dishwasher breaks. And now all of a sudden we've spent a large portion of the money that we had maybe stored away to deal with some of our spring and summer costs, and it's gone. Right, so we're just running into a little of these. Now, I understand that the parklets are not a right for us. They're not a property, but we are investing in something that may not be here for much longer, or we're asked to tear down and then rebuild, which would incur more expenses that we can't see in the future. And we're really just asking that you guys would spread the costs out, take a strong look at what the costs actually are and if they're absolutely necessary, or if there's a way for the city to work with us and help us in making it more affordable and financially feasible for us to apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, Megan.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Alejandra. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Megan. Megan's a poppin' today, right? We're all here. Yay. Graham, you just said what we're all thinking so well, but I just want to, again, underline the fact that as small businesses, we make Santa Barbara vibrant. And if you guys really believe in parklets, for us, you really should. We need to take a look at what's being asked of us and to see if it even makes sense. You know, as someone in the coastal development zone, I'd be asked to pay, even before knowing whether or not the parklet that I could afford to build would qualify, let's just say $18,000. And that's all of these fees plus K-rails. And I could spend that money and, again, never be successful or never be able to build the parklet that I want. The Funk Zone's very competitive for leases. I could lose my lease tomorrow. And then what would happen to my investment? So if you're really trying to make an opportunity for people, small businesses to have a parklet, we need to come up with a plan so that it's actually achievable for a small business. And when we talked about maybe amortizing these fees, the city is going to be our landlord. So there's time on your side. If you think that it's maybe a 5-year lease, why not, if you need to recoup these costs to pay city planners and whatnot, split that into 60 months of a more reasonable payment that we could actually pay by month, and that whoever eventually enjoys the parklet can also participate in paying, or the landlord can advertise as an amenity on the property, like who actually owns the building. But, these are just some things to think about if you want to be supportive of small businesses. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Comments from committee? Ms. Harmon?
Thank you, Chair Gutierrez. First, I want to say thank you to the public commenters. I really appreciate you. I know you have so much on your plate. That was clear from the comments, and also we know that well. So to come here in the middle of the day, I know it's not easy. I really appreciate it. I want to just make a couple of clarifying comments to start. So first, this is our permanent parklet program. So what we're putting in place here is the process to have this permanently. So I think there's something to really sort of keep in mind, that the whole point of going through this exercise is so that in 2 weeks or a month or a year, you don't have to come back to a city council meeting and say, wait a second, you guys already said we could have a parklet. So I want to just be really clear, like, the reason we're doing this is so that you can have some, to the extent that there's any surety in this world about anything, like some sense that, like, we are agreeing that this is how we are going to move forward on with regard to parklets that are off of State Street. Now, there is the provision that says, and I think it was mentioned, that the licenses can be for a period from 1 to 5 years, like that, maybe that's sort of the, where there's some confusion going in, like, is this permanent or is this not? The program is permanent. The licenses are for a specific duration, but let's say you get a 3-year license. At the end of that 3 years, my understanding is, and I hope our city attorney will jump in if I'm wrong, you don't have to go through this whole process again. It's just a license renewal. So, like, that's kind of just the way these programs work, and I hear you. Like, it would be awesome if you could get it and say, like, permanently for the life of forever. It just isn't. That's not how licenses work. So I think we have done what we're trying to do, and the point I think of this conversation really is to just nail down some of these things so that you guys can know, like, we're not going to have to keep coming back every month for a new issue that comes up. So, I don't know if that gives any comfort, but that's sort of the purpose. And I will also say, getting to agreement about whether or not we even allow parklets off of State Street was a very, very difficult conversation. It was not a slam dunk. It was not unanimous. I mean, it was a really tough conversation. And I say that because what I want to really share with all of you is, like, a lot of what we're seeing here and what you're dealing with comes from just this, like, lack of unanimity about whether these parklets should exist at all. Not because they're not awesome, but there are serious safety concerns. Folks do have serious aesthetic concerns. I personally am not one of those people, but I very much respect my colleagues who have that position, and I want to be clear, like, it's not a matter of supporting small business or not supporting small business. Like, there are a lot of things that have gone into this conversation that everyone is trying to balance, and I think what you're seeing here with regard to these fees is really that in order to get to yes, in order to get to, okay, we can have parklets, we had to be very strict about design standards. We had to be very strict about particular safety standards, and that was how we got to having a program at all. And I don't love talking about how the sausage gets made, but that's frankly what happened. And I think understanding that background is helpful maybe to seeing, like, wow, we went from having this to feeling like there's a whole bunch of process, it's super opaque, it's super expensive. Part of that is because there just was not consistency and coherence about how we all feel about the existence of the parklets in general. So
That's some background. Sorry, I lose my breath really easily. I'm like about to have a baby any second. So with all that said, as to the specific fees, I really appreciate how everyone was clear that fees have to be charged. Thank you. That honestly makes our job a lot easier, I think, when we all sort of start from the same premise. And it seems like what I'm hearing is really this license application fee is the biggest issue. Okay, sorry, we're not allowed to. Coastal Commission is like, I'm also on the Coastal Commission. That is so far out of our control, unfortunately, and it's such a wildly expensive process. I will say, as it pertains to the Coastal Commission, it is very likely, I think probably certain, I'm looking at our team, that a CDP would be required in the coastal zone. Those are just very expensive, very difficult to do, and frankly, that's not a city issue. But there is a Coastal Commission meeting that starts tomorrow, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and you can make virtual comments. So to the extent that the difficulty and expense involved in applying for a CDP is something that you guys want to opine on, you know, you get your time at Coastal Commission as well, and you can just Google it. Or you can send an email to the Coastal Commission. And I personally have voted against these at the Coastal Commission. I don't like how expensive and difficult it is, but I think it would be helpful for the commission in general to hear that for an 800 square foot restaurant, a CDP is like a huge, huge burden. And we don't hear that often from small businesses, but set that aside. Back to the parklet license application fee. Because there was so much disagreement and controversy about what is necessary to pass this program, just a lot of requirements came in. And frankly, some of them are necessary. They're for safety, right? And so everything we added another cost and more time and more difficulty. So I think what you're seeing truly is reflective of our desire to be comprehensive in how we think about these parklets, A, and B, to put something in place that can truly be permanent. We did not want to put in place a program that in 2 years we're going to say, you know what, these don't look good, and we want you to do it again. And so I really think that was sort of the heart of how we got here. I don't know how we lower these fees. I hear what you're saying, that it's not feasible. I also don't know from our side how we cannot, we're not making anything off of this. And so I'm really sort of struggling to square that circle. I would be open to, perhaps very open, to coming up with some type of plan where there's milestones. The initial fee is $1,000. When you get to X point, your second 1,000 is owed. I don't know. Again, this is a question to Ms. Clark or something for her to think about for the afternoon. I don't know if that's feasible. Are all the costs to the city up front? To the extent that we could separate any of it out, it sounds like that would be extremely helpful. I like that idea. I don't see these numbers going down, unfortunately. But if we can find some way to not require it all up front, I think that's great. I don't know if that's possible. So that was very long-winded. I just wanted to give you the full context of what I'm thinking. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Friedman?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to public comment. It does raise the issues, and I appreciate you coming to the Finance Committee for this item. I know you'll be in there in the afternoon, or others will. You know, and where Councilmember Harmon is on this, in terms of the fees, if we were to lower them, then they become on the city, and there's a council policy right now for all fees throughout the city on pretty much everything is due to budget challenges, structural over time for most of the departments is to move towards cost recovery of our fees, and it presents itself with some very challenging and situations such as a couple weeks ago we had water fees and those coming forward, and it was an uncomfortable conversation as well in terms of just our costs, like yours are going up, inflation and all that. So one of the questions I would like to ask the question, because if it doesn't get asked here, I'm positive at least one of our colleagues or two would probably want to ask in the afternoon. And Councilmember Harmon actually did says she's open to, in a way, kind of amortizing it or at least having the milestones. Is that something that's possible? Is as you incur costs of that to that 2,500, it's not going to all happen at once because you have to bill for the staff time that's going through. And then the other question I would have is I know when we do rents, especially in the harbor, you do seasonally adjusted rents, where in the slow season you pay less because you're not having the type of business that you have, and then in the summer you pay more to make up for it. So overall, your rents is what it's set at the year, but you're paying more during your busier time, so it helps with your cash flow. Is that something that we could do as well?
Councilmember Friedman, through the chair, I don't want to speak on behalf of community development. I think Mr. Isaacson unfortunately had to step out, and how they would want to be collecting their fees. In terms of public works for the $2,500, we could spread that out. We could collect it at the end, just before permit issuance. We would need to collect it before we issued the license to be sure that we received those fees for the work that had been done. As to the annual fee, we had intended to charge that once per year, just to make it simpler. That is something we could charge more frequently, but that does add additional administrative burden in terms of billing that, making sure we get those collections, and then getting the revenue in. Because the intention, as Councilmember Harmon stated, is that these are, as permanent as something could be, that's put in the public right of way, where really nothing is ever permanent. We'd intended to issue these licenses for longer durations, and so rather than a month to month, we were looking for an annual. It looks like Mr. Maurer would like to say something.
Committee Member Freeman, through the chair, I am very empathetic to the cost of our businesses and our community, and we, as you know, we really strive to drive them down. I just want to emphasize the point that Ms. Clark made, that every time we add a step to the process, that is additional staff time. That is additional. Something could go wrong. It requires, I'm sure every small business pays very close attention to their overhead and what that's doing. And I do understand their concern, but it's adding overhead to a system that we're trying desperately to cut overhead and become more efficient. So obviously we'll do whatever council asks us or directs us to do, but we're at a point that every time we have to do more transactions with the public, it costs us more staff time, and one or two businesses, that doesn't make a difference, but it's not one or two businesses. You multiply that by hundreds of interactions, and then it starts really adding up, and it ends up being extra FTEs that the city just cannot afford.
Thank you for the clarification. That's helpful because I guess the trade-off would be the costs up front versus additional costs or a more complex process. So,
Chair Gutierrez, Councilmember Friedman, I don't know if you wanted to answer to your other question about how we do the harbor. It was a good question, but the issue that's more apples to oranges, because in that case, we're the tenants and there's a lease, and it's also based on the percentages too, in terms of what they bring in, where this is more just a license fee and it's cost recovery. And, it is expensive. I'll just give at least one example of way on a smaller scale, small wireless facilities that are put in our public right of way. We're allowed to recover our costs for our staff time, the application process, reviewing it, and that's around $800-900, $1,000, or just something that small. So it just goes in relation to this, where that cost is. Obviously, the need to spend more staff time in doing all this.
Thank you for just the clarifications, because I think that's helpful for the overall discussion, because there were good points that were raised and different options, and the clarification on the waterfront, because they are tenants, and so we get a percentage of their rents, so that's how they're able to defer on that. So my comments are in line with Councilmember Harmon's, and for now, I'm sure there'll be a larger discussion, but I would supportive of the staff recommendation. But I think when it comes back this afternoon to council, the ability to look at, can we spread out that initial 2,500 over, over the time, or maybe a little bit up front, and then at the end, you'd pay this a second payment at the end of the process, which would, be a couple months or a few months down the line before you would get the permit itself, to ensure that the payment's there before you get the permit. So that if you could prepare that this afternoon as part of the discussion in there, that would be helpful. And so that's where I am right now, is just support moving it forward as is, but with that discussion and more information available to full council.
Thank you. I want to thank public comment. I think your feedback really helped us also formulate a recommendation. So thank you. Imagine if you guys weren't here. This would have probably passed. I do want to thank staff. I know that my questions can be a little straightforward, but I put myself in the community shoes. But I loved that we had this conversation, because I think the business owners in the communities have a more clear understanding of why these fees, and that they're willing to pay these fees, and they understand that we are giving them an opportunity to, make business, and they are going to be using the public right away. So I think we both want to work as a team, but we need more clarification, and I am in support with Councilmember Megan Harmon on her request to spread out those payments. And thank you for the clarification why that payment needs to be paid in full before giving that receiving the license. And I will move it forward. Did anybody want to make the motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will move this item forward with the additional request that we receive more detailed information about how to amortize the application fee over time.
And I'll second it.
Okay, motion was made by Member Harmon, seconded by Vice Chair Freeman. We'll start with Committee Member Harmon.
Yes.
Vice Chair Freeman.
Yes.
Chair Gutierrez.
Yes.
That motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.